when I talk to people about their relationship with their soon-to-be ex, they really have to do a shift because they've been married to this person for an amount of time and the relationship is very different. It is, you have to really compromise with each other and you have to care about each other's feelings and show empathy and really be a support for each other. And that's not what the relationship is when you're going through divorce.
Welcome to Divorce Diaries, where attorney Cary Jacobson brings you real stories, hard truths, and practical advice on navigating divorce and family law. Whether you're going through it, considering it, or just curious, this is your place for clarity, confidence, and resilience.
Welcome back to Divorce Diaries, Lessons from the Trenches. I'm your host, Cary Jacobson. I'm an attorney, mediator, and founder of Jacobson Family Law, where we help clients keep the drama out of divorce. Today's episode is all about the most emotionally draining, complex situations many divorcing parents may face. How do you co-parent with someone who's high conflict or might even be a narcissist? And to help us unpack this incredibly important topic, I'm joined by someone who truly gets it, not just professionally, but also personally. Jill Kaufman is a divorce coach, a therapist, a mediator, and a co-parenting expert. After going through her own difficult divorce, she made it her mission to help others navigate the process with more clarity, less stress, and a greater sense of peace. She's the author of a fantastic book, a creator of a powerful online course, and works with parents in her transformational coaching program. Jill is passionate about helping families, especially children, thrive even in the middle of conflict. Thank you so much, Jill, for being here.
Thank you, Cary, for having me.
Absolutely. Can we start with your story? I understand that you've been through a high conflict divorce yourself. How did that experience impact the work that you do now?
Well, so I was a therapist, and I thought I could handle it emotionally going through divorce. And little did I know that it is very different when you're counseling people than when you're going through it yourself. And so I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was barely functioning. I had three, children, 18, 16, and 12. And it was really overwhelming. And, my relationship with my now ex-husband was not great. I mean, I think most people, when they're going through divorce, struggle with that. You're living in the same house and it's very difficult. But the positive is we do have a very good relationship now.
Right.
This is years later. And, it happened a couple years after the divorce. And so, even if you do have a high conflict divorce, you can change during the divorce or after the divorce. And you can change the relationship. And there are things that you can do to make things better, which I didn't really know back then, but I've worked with tons of people now and it really does work.
Yeah. You mentioned that even though you were a therapist, how did that help or hinder how you kind of went through the process yourself?
Well, luckily I was in therapy, my own therapist, and that helped. But I think it also, I was able, during my divorce, we were trying to come to agreements that, it was a mess and we couldn't. We did this like full day mediation with both in separate rooms with us going back and forth. And after that, I really started detaching myself from the emotions. And I started to think about, okay, there must be a better way. I don't want to go to court. There must be a better way to get to a solution here. And I actually figured it out with, because I knew my ex better than my attorney did. And I knew what was important to him and I knew what was important to me. And so I just went to him after that day and I said, you know what, I will agree to everything that you want if you give me this. Right. And there was just one thing that I wanted. And he said, okay. And we told our attorneys and we signed the agreement and that was the end of it. And so I think maybe being a therapist helped me kind of know that I was too emotional and I needed to think clearly.
Yeah. And when you're working with clients, because I know that you are also a divorce coach,
Yeah.
how do you kind of guide them in keeping those emotions in check so that they can kind of do that same process?
Well, it's easy as a therapist, it's easy for me to recognize when somebody is making emotional decisions,
Right.
also because I've been through it. And so I very gently point that out. And I don't point out, you're making an emotional decision. I just ask them, is this really worth it to you?
Right.
Like what is really worth it? And so we really get down to, and sometimes they don't know at first, they're like, yeah, of course it's worth it to me to stay in the house because I don't want, the kids to go through an upheaval. And so, or something like that. And,
Right.
we kind of break it down what are you worried about? Why do you think your children won't be able to be okay if you sell the house? Or, we really get down to, what's behind the emotion.
Right. Yeah. So one of the most common questions that we hear, is how do I co-parent with someone who just wants to fight? Someone who may send the multi-paragraph text message or email, and so much of it is just bashing that person and not really an actual issue, or there might be just a couple of small issues in there with all of this, these other things. How do you talk to your clients about dealing with that situation?
Great question. I mean, it happens all the time. People are anxious
Right.
and fearful that, financially they're going not to be okay. And there's so many things going on. Are they going to have enough time with their children? And are they going to have a good relationship with their children? Um, so basically, um, when when I talk to people about their relationship with their soon-to-be ex, they really have to do a shift because they've been married to this person for an amount of time and the relationship is very different.
Uh-huh.
It is, you have to really compromise with each other and you have to care about each other's feelings and show empathy and really be a support for each other. And that's not what the relationship is when you're going through divorce. It's completely different. It's like being colleagues or coworkers. And you really don't have to care about all the things that they feel and compromise about everything. You can set boundaries and you can set them. Like if you were talking to a colleague or coworker, would you make a like wise guy comment or would you be sarcastic? No, you would be very straightforward, kind,
Mhm.
friendly, but also set some boundaries.
Right.
And that's the shift that people have to make so that they can really take the emotion out of it. The past is the past. And you really shouldn't talk about the past anymore. You should talk about what you need today and going forward. And so if you can make that shift, it makes it a lot easier to interact. The other thing is, I don't know, Bill Eddy.
I, I am very familiar.
Everybody who works in high conflict divorces knows Bill Eddy, but he has the BIF method.
Yeah.
And you want to be brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
Mhm.
And so anytime you email or text anybody, or even when you talk to them, you don't want to go off on tangents and say, well, I really think that this is the best thing for our daughter. You know, she's, whatever it is, you don't want to give your how you feel because that's not really relevant anymore. You just want to talk about the facts and you want to make it as brief as you can and you want to set some boundaries. So there's a lot of tools you can use. But the biggest thing is that shift in mindset from being a married couple to being co-parents and like colleagues.
Right. And just reminding yourself that you don't have to always respond right away. I think that's one, especially in our, tech world. People people kind of think that just because they've gotten a message or an email or what have you, that they have to respond right away. And, I often tell people, you can set those boundaries as well, unless you can, unless it's an emergency, you can say, I'm not going to respond outside of, until I'm out of work hours or, in certain times of day and that sort of thing, just so that it doesn't have to impact you directly as much, right?
Right.
That
Yeah,
happens.
exactly. And, you can set your phone to not give you messages while you're at work. And if you could tell your soon to be ex that if it's an emergency, call me,
Right.
because I can't look at texts or emails during work hours,
Yeah.
and you want to say that in a friendly way too,
Mhm.
so that it doesn't trigger some kind of argument.
Right. Yeah. Now, I've heard of the term parallel parenting, and I know that this has come up, sometimes, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Can you explain what parallel parenting is and when it may be a better option than traditional co-parenting?
Right. So co-parenting is when you both together come to an agreement on the rules and how you're going to parent your children. And you listen to each other and you try to work together for solutions. Sometimes that's not possible if you have a co-parent who is not interested in doing that. So then you would need to parallel parent. And parallel parenting is basically you're doing something in your home and they're doing something in their home, and you're just not communicating about that. And you're basically having different rules in each house, and you parent differently. And while that's not ideal, children can be okay with that.
Mhm.
Children understand that their parents are different and there could be different rules. I mean, they know there's different rules at school than there are at home. So, like, they
Mhm.
understand that it's not so bad for kids. I mean, of course, it's better to have a really, collaborative relationship and work together, because they do sense tension in the relationship, and that's not good for kids. But if you can't, then you can't control someone else, right? So
Right.
you have to do what you have to do.
What's a scenario where parallel parenting might be appropriate? Like under what are those circumstances?
So if, let's say, you have children who need to get to bed by like 8:30 because they need a lot of sleep, and they're young and they have to be awake for school in the morning, and your co-parent says, well, I don't get home until 7:30, so I'm not going to put them to sleep at 8:30. It's not enough time for me.
Mhm.
I'm going to put them to bed at 9:30. And you know that that's not good for your children. And so you put them to bed at 8:30, and that's okay. And you can just explain that, I've had more time with you. Your mom or your dad wants to have a later um, bedtime, and that's okay. You have to adjust for each parent, and never badmouth the other parent. Just
Right.
say that we have different situations and this is the way it is.
Okay. Got it. Obviously, conflict between the parents can impact children. What are some ways that parents can protect their kids from, those emotions that come up during the divorce and protect their kids from that conflict?
Oh, there's a lot of ways. Now, first of all, you get so caught up in the divorce that you focus on the divorce instead of focusing on your children, right? You're like, I have to spend time, going through my financials, and I can't, focus on them. Well, the bottom line is kids need your attention even when you're going through divorce. So they're not going to understand that you have lots of other things to do. So maybe you have to put off, doing some things because your kids need you. And that doesn't mean you can't take breaks and, work on things that, you know, that are divorce related, but make sure you're present and in the moment with your children, and you're not distracted when you're with them thinking about your divorce. And the only way to do that is to take care of yourself, exercise, have a therapist, divorce coach, have a team around you that you can really trust, so that you don't have to worry, about your divorce all the time.
Mhm.
The other thing is, You don't want to say anything negative about the other parent. You don't want to use your children as messengers between you and the other parent. And you want to support the child's relationship with the other parent. Unless there's abuse, a child does better having relationships with both parents. And so whatever you can do to support that relationship. Now, let's say a child comes to you and says, I'm really upset because, dad won't let me do this. And when he says that, I get very upset. You shouldn't be the one to go then and tell the parent. What you should do is tell the child, well, it sounds like you're really upset. You need to talk to dad about that. And so what you're doing is you're empowering your child to set boundaries themselves and learn how to manage the relationship between them and the other parent. If you get involved, it's called triangulation, and it's not healthy. It's not a healthy dynamic in families. So you really want to encourage the child to talk directly to the parent.
And it also gives them a place, the empowerment to share what their feelings are
Right.
with that parent and how those feelings are impacting them.
Exactly. And that's really important that, you didn't then get upset and start a fight. And then the child feels like, oh, it's my fault that my parents are fighting. So all of that is not ideal. You really want to step out of that relationship between the parent and the child.
Now, does that potentially change if that child may be fearful of how that parent may react to those feelings? Maybe that the other parent is not as emotionally supportive, right? Because not both parents aren't necessarily the same when it comes to supporting a child's emotions. How would your advice, if would it change it if at all in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they express that they're scared to talk to the other parent, as a therapist, I would say, what are you scared of? But really you can get a therapist involved. And you can have the child talk to the therapist about that if you aren't able to handle that. But if you can ask the child, what are you scared of? Well, mom might get mad if I say that. Well, so what? What if mom gets mad? What's frightening about that? Well, I don't like it when she gets mad. If they say, she yells at me, well, then you can tell her not, please don't yell, like you want to really help children handle this on their own. And it's amazing how they can get really empowered when they confront a parent and set some boundaries, set healthy boundaries. And, I've seen it happen where a parent changes, and once the child, says, please don't yell at me, they're realizing that, this child is not going to want to come here if I'm yelling, and I really have to protect my relationship with them. And I've seen really positive things happen after that.
Yeah. What are some early signs that someone may be divorcing someone who is a narcissist? I feel like I hear that term all the time. So I'm cautionary in using it. Or someone that's just a high conflict person. And is there something that those people should do to prepare differently for the divorce process?
Well, it depends. I think there's a strategy when you're divorcing someone who's a high conflict person, whether they're narcissistic or not. It's pretty much similar behavior. There's a strategy because you don't want to trigger that person.
Right.
And a lot of times, attorneys are very useful, but a lot of times attorneys don't realize their wording triggers other people, especially high conflict people. And so you want to make sure that you have an attorney who's knowledgeable on how to interact and communicate with a high conflict person. And you want to say things in very subtle ways. So you don't want to say, you've been late every time you come to pick up Sally. And that's poor parenting, you want to say, could you please let me know if you're going to be late and don't be more than a couple minutes late. because she, Sally gets really worried when you're not there.
Mhm.
And so you really want to be non-threatening. And most people know they have a high conflict person they're dealing with because they were married to them,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And they aren't easy, they're difficult. And so, to prepare for it, you really have to work on taking the emotions out of it. Because if you were married to that person and it was a high conflict person, you have a lot of built up anger, maybe, and resentment, or your fear about dealing with them. A lot of times I get clients who don't want to be in the same room with them,
Right.
with a mediator. And they don't realize that, when you're married, you're really kind of stuck living with someone. When you're divorcing, you have a lot more, you're more empowered if
Right.
you're dealing with a narcissist or a high conflict person, because there are laws in place to protect you. And yes, they can make it more difficult,
Mhm.
but at some point they can't,
Yeah. There's going to be an end of some sort.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you have to go to trial, the judge will rule probably in your favor. And I think that's the strategy too. You want to really talk to the attorney and the mediator about, like, this is going to be, I'm going to make a better deal than if we went to court. So to avoid that, avoid going to court, this is going to be better for everybody.
Absolutely. I know you have a coaching program, and that in that program you talk about reducing stress and increasing, individual's confidence. What is one small mindset shift or tool that people can make to make a big difference in how someone is feeling, just overwhelmed by the divorce process?
Well, it sounds really simple, but there's deep abdominal breathing.
Mhm.
And if you do it right, you breathe in and you actually push your stomach out when you're breathing in so that you can get a really deep, deep breath. And you pull your stomach in when you breathe out. Um, and as you do this more and more, your lungs expand and you're able to get these really deep breaths. Like,
Mhm.
I always tell people, if they put their hand on their chest and their chest is going up, that's a chest breath. But if
Mhm.
you put your hand on your stomach and your stomach's going out, that's an abdominal breath.
Mhm.
And so when you get these deep breaths, your brain actually releases a hormone that calms you.
Mhm.
And if you practice this before you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning, um, you actually expand the surface area of your lungs, and you can learn how to do these deep breaths anytime. So if you're talking or you get a text from your soon to be ex, you can do these deep breaths and you can really get yourself more calm. And that's the key. We are triggered and our blood starts pumping and our heart starts racing, and your amygdala is the base of your brain. Your prefrontal cortex is the thinking part, and that thinking part shuts off. So you can't really think through how you're going to respond. And
Right.
your base of your brain is really just fight or flight. And you can't really handle all the things you need to handle when you're going through this process if that's the only thing you can do, fight or run away. So
Right.
you really have to learn techniques like deep breathing. There's meditations, there's lots of things like that to get yourself calm. Even drinking a glass of water,
Mhm.
is something that will give you some pause so that you don't respond right away.
Yeah. And exactly. I was just thinking that as well. Take a moment to think about it, to calm yourself down and then respond. I think, setting those boundaries again about how much time you're going to wait to respond can also, you know, greatly improve your emotional bandwidth of, when responding.
Absolutely. And you're not going to respond in the best way if you respond right away.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's much better to think through how you want to respond or if you even need to respond.
Yeah. And then, the other thing that can also help, I'm a huge person, like, of using technology where it can be appropriate. If you're using co-parenting apps, some of them have like a tone check, or ChatGPT, any AI thing, you can put in the question or the text or the, whatever it is, and say, help me respond in a simple professional manner, and it takes some of that emotion out of it because you're not the one like in it.
Yes, absolutely. ChatGPT is amazing for this.
Yeah,
And it just, when you do that and you read it back, it changes it shifts your mindset so that you're thinking and you're not
absolutely.
reacting.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your book and the course that you teach or that you have available to your clients. What can our listeners expect, and who are they best suited for?
So the book and the course, they kind of parallel each other, but it's really for people who are going through divorce, for parents who are going through divorce. So from the point of like when you're almost ready to make that step until the divorce is over, it goes into how to handle your emotions, how to develop your clarity around your goals and priorities, and how to negotiate your settlement agreement. And it also has information on, how to deal with your finances and budgets, and
Mhm.
what information to collect. And I have a ton of information in there. And if people are really good at doing it on their own, they can do that with the book or the online course. If not, then they can join my group coaching program. And you can use the online course and the book in addition to having me facilitate them working through that.
Got it. Awesome. Those sound like great resources for anyone who may be going through the divorce process.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there.
Yeah. Well, Jill, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. Your practical tips and empathy are exactly what so many of our listeners need right now. If you listeners are going through a divorce or struggling to co-parent with a high conflict ex, I highly encourage you to check out Jill's work. You can find her book, online course, and coaching program at her website, divorcecoachjill.com. As always, thanks for tuning in to Divorce Diaries, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend who might need it. And if you're looking for legal support for your own peaceful divorce or custody process, check out our website at jacobsonfamilylaw.com.
Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Divorce Diaries. Remember, every journey is unique, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Visit jacobsonfamilylaw.com or call 443-726-4912 for support and guidance.